pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we have a roll call, please.
Ferguson.
Here.
Richardson.
Here.
Edley.
Here.
And Gonzalez.
Here.
And it's noted that Rhonda Wassam and Dan Leonard are absent and excused. And Walters, absent and excused.
Yeah. Okay, moving on to the agenda. Is there any conflict of interest? Seeing none. The approval of the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda for the meeting, Planning Commission meeting for Tuesday, June 18th, 2024.
Second. Okay, moved by Renee, seconded by Carl. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. With the minutes, approval of the minutes, I have one item on page 3 where we're talking about SPR 3-24. In the first paragraph, they're talking about there is currently one commercial building and 2 residential homes located on the site which would need to be demolished. I believe there are 3 homes.
Okay.
Correct.
That correction.
Good catch.
Other than that, I have no other issues with the minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes of June 4th, 2024, regular meeting with the noted change on the SPR, what was that, 2-23? Or
3-24.
3-24.
Second. Moved by Steve, second by Carl, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. All right, we'll have our first public comment at 6:35.
Good evening. Judy Nemitz, East Bay Township resident. I want to thank you all for your time going through this over 350-page document. I think you've done a great job, and it looks like you're entering the home stretch here. I did send some correspondence regarding 4.37, et cetera. I know that there was a error on my part. The last sentence says the word intimate instead of utmost. I'm sorry, my spell check changed it, and I know you're all cozying up to this ordinance a lot, but if you want to be intimate with it, that's great. So that's a change, so thank you for understanding that. Page 5.5-25D1C signage. You talk about nameplates in the Lake District. First of all, I'm really concerned how you're going to monitor that, and do you really want to send your zoning people out for that type of infraction? We talk about a nameplate being a total square signage of 1.5 feet. That's 2 inches by 9 inches. Really, Hobbs Highway is 55 miles an hour, and if you can see that nameplate, I'll give you, I don't know, probably some groceries at Olson's, but that, it really monitoring that is, people are going to tack it to trees, they're going to tack it to the road commission signs. You know, I don't think you want to deal with that, really. I suggest you remove it. And then 5-13, exterior lighting. I didn't see a lot of changes in there regarding any, D still says residential. Now is the time for us to really look at the residential lighting issue, and at least neighboring trespass, shielding, that type of thing, I think is really important, unless you move that to another section. Now is the time. So I appreciate you looking at that tonight. And then, again, I'm hoping that we could do something with septic systems. I'm not sure the state is going to follow through and react fast enough. They're pretty reactionary, so maybe we could be proactive and think about that. And I know that Claire and the department has been looking at some of those things. So I thank you tonight, going through the last of the sections, and everybody stay cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing nobody else, we'll close it at 6:39.
His last meetings, I've been able to pull it up.
Okay. Correspondence?
No, it is. Okay. I'm sorry. Renee was just asking about the link to the ordinance. Can you repeat that, Paul?
Correspondence.
Correspondence, we, on your desk, you have the email from Judy Nemitz, and then you also have the updated provisions that were sent by Giffords Webster after the draft ordinance went out related to gravel pits.
Thank you. Okay, on to the business at hand, which is item 8, the zoning ordinance rewrite.
Okay, so just wanted to give a couple updates. The residential lighting, that is on, I just wanted to let the Planning Commission know that is on the agenda to discuss with the Township Board at the joint meeting next month. So I think the last time we discussed it, there was discussion about police power ordinance and whether or not the Township Board had appetite to take that up, so I thought it would be appropriate discussion item to discuss with the Township Board next month at the July 16th meeting. Also, with the septic systems, just wanted to update you, we've met with the Watershed Center, we've also reached out and had a few conversations with the Grand Traverse County Health Department, as well as with Grand Traverse County, and so the Health Department is looking to schedule a meeting to convene all of the townships to kind of take a look at, is there something that we can work on that's a septic ordinance that's consistent throughout the county? If not, the township will be moving forward with developing our own township septic ordinance and looking at policy options, but we do think that it would be prudent to take a look at coordinating with the county and with other townships. So that's kind of where we're at right now.
Great.
And then after the last meeting, we met with Giffords Webster, have also had a few follow-up conversations with legal counsel. I sent all of the edits and discussion points that were discussed at the last meeting have been integrated into this updated draft of the ordinance, and I'll turn it over to Joe to just kind of go over where we are after last meeting, and then go through Articles 5 and 6 this evening.
Thank you, Claire. Appreciate the little introduction there. Just to kind of elaborate on the note on the lighting, residential lighting, there are some kind of legal and enforcement related reasons why it's best to do that in a general ordinance. And we've been discussing that with the attorney, and there is an approach to be taken there, and as Claire said, she's been discussing it with the Township Board. So just did want to note that that's the reason it's being discussed as a separate ordinance. Tonight we are talking about Article 5, which is site standards, and Article 6, which is development standards. So at this point in the process, for anybody who might be following along, the Zoning Ordinance Steering Committee has given its seal of approval to the draft ordinance, and now the Planning Commission is reviewing it. And we're using these workshops to review the draft ordinance in segments. And ultimately, the Planning Commission will hold an official public hearing at which they will move the ordinance onto the Township Board for final adoption. There will be a joint session between the two, most likely next month, to discuss the ordinance together before the public hearing occurs and council gets it in its hands. Article 5 sets forth standards for site development that apply broadly to most development. So when you do a site plan, you've got to be looking through Article 5 to see how your site can be developed. Accessory buildings, off-street parking, signs, especially temporary signs, landscaping and buffering, pedestrian-oriented commercial design, exterior lighting, and sidewalks and pathways are all article or sections that got pretty heavily redone. You'll notice that the off-street parking requirements in particular are pretty different from what's in the current ordinance. The attempt there is really to take a more market-based approach to parking requirements, try to avoid lots of excess asphalt, and give the Planning Commission and Township in general a bit more flexibility around parking and the requirements related to that. Signs, the temporary sign in particular, changes are really built around complying with Gilbert versus Reed, which placed pretty heavy restrictions on our ability to regulate signs by content. So that's something to look out for. There are also some additional maintenance standards and things that weren't in there before, and it's been reorganized. And I think the illumination and certain other standards like that are a lot clearer now. I don't have anything else real specific to say about any of those right now, but those are a couple things I wanted to highlight.
Hey, Joe,
Article
do you mind?
6.
Oh,
What's
sorry.
that?
Joe, do you mind if I just highlight the billboard discussion that we had earlier?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Go
Okay.
ahead.
So in this section, under signs, billboards are also discussed, and so currently, we're taking a close look at signage and specifically billboard provisions. As Paul is aware, the ZBA has a pending variance request for a billboard along US 31. So we've been taking a close look at it with our consultant with Gethels Webster as well as legal counsel. I would like to have a policy discussion with the Planning Commission that does a little bit deeper dive into kind of broadly signage as well as billboard provisions, because there are a lot of policy decisions to be made, and I think that discussion with the Planning Commission will help shape the standards related to billboards. So the standards need to be based on the intent, and so you'll see as outlined in section 5.4A of the draft ordinance, the intent, it's related to public safety, aesthetics, free speech, sharing of information, economic development, and then the discontinuation of non-conforming signs. So I want to really take a close look at what really is our intent with signage and with billboards. And then based on that intent, how can we craft standards that really meet the intent? Because I think in some instances, we have our standards there, but we don't have a really strong connection between what the basis was for some of those. And in some instances, we just don't have the historical record we don't have. So I found a great resource. It's from 2021. It's the Michigan Sign Guidebook. It was developed by a nonprofit. It's called Scenic Michigan, and it was recommended by the Michigan Association of Planning as a resource. I can definitely share that with the Planning Commission, but some of the questions that we're looking at are related to signage and billboards in particular is the appropriate size, location, and illumination of billboards along US 31. So currently, they're allowed through special land use permit in the regional business district, and in our draft ordinance, that continues. We allow up to 3 that are permitted just based on our distance separation requirements, and so we still have that in the updated draft ordinance. Right now, our size of the billboard is limited to 75 square feet. And that's not consistent with other townships. So other neighboring communities are anywhere from like 200 up to 300 square feet for their billboards. So that's something to take a look at. And in talking with legal counsel, it's not that we can't allow, it's not that we can't have 75 square feet as the requirement, but we need to really take a look at what's the rationale behind that and relate it back to the intent of the ordinance.
Claire, can I just,
Yeah,
are
sure.
the ones that are there now non-conforming?
They are.
All of them, like the 3 Mile, like by the Bear Store? That's
I
a
would
huge,
need
that's
to
got to be
double-
greater than 75 square
I would
feet.
need to double check on that because, yes, technically they would be because they're all, the maximum size is 75 square feet.
And they're bigger, yeah,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are all around 200 to 250.
okay.
So another thing to take a look at is electronic message boards. And so in this draft ordinance, we allow electronic message boards, but only on 1/3 of the surface area, so not the entire sign. That's another thing to take a look at. And in the public comment that we've received related to billboard, there's been concern about electronic message boards and just the, safety concerns, at least from the perspective of the public and the comments that have been received. So the policy justification should make a connection on how the restrictions will advance the goals or intent of the township. Justification can come from studies, it can come from anecdotal evidence, but all information should really be evaluated to help us inform policy. So I don't want to take a deep dive into this tonight, but I do want to just kind of provide that overview of that's something that I do think we need to take a closer look at with our zoning ordinance.
In that discussion, obviously, I don't think it would be good tonight because we're missing some members, quite a number of members, I think. But when would you want to pursue that discussion?
So we're going to be sending out a survey as a follow-up beach district survey. And so part of the public survey is we're going to be doing a number of different follow-up related to beach district envisioning. But part of that is going to be visual preference related to signs. And so I would like to have the results of that survey when we do a deeper dive with the Planning Commission.
Okay, because right now, tonight, part of the discussion is on billboards, which is part 5.
Right.
So we're going to just be basing our discussion tonight on the material here.
That's
full well
correct.
knowing that we've got another discussion.
Yep, that's correct. And the material here is really consistent with what's already in our ordinance. We didn't really make substantial changes to the billboard. So it's kind of just a carryover, but I do think we want to take a close policy look at it. Once we have a
Well,
little more
there is one
information.
that's a big change. We're reducing it from 300 to 200 in the permitted size of the billboards. Trust me, I looked at it.
Right now, we actually are only allowing them at 75 square feet.
Oh, no. I'm just talking about in the changes themselves. The 75 square feet, given the speed limit, is still consistent.
But what's the 300 to 200 change?
I don't have the ordinance in front of me, but basically, excuse me.
Those are the separation standards, 200 feet from residential and 300 feet from another sign. Another board.
No. I'm looking down here on, under billboards, it'd be my page is 5-29, and item 4 is billboards, but down here in E, it says the surface display area sign face of any side of a billboard may not exceed 200 square feet. If a billboard abuts a portion of a highway with a posted speed limit of 45 or less, the surface display area limits may be a maximum of 75 square feet instead of the 200 square feet.
Okay, Paul, that's been updated, and so right now, E, in the updated version, reads, "The surface display area of any side of a billboard shall not exceed 75 square feet." We
Oh,
don't
okay.
relate it back to
All right,
miles
I have
per
an
hour.
earlier version, so.
Yeah.
Okay, so. Okay.
So that is a change, but it's really just an acknowledgement that the entire corridor is 45 miles per hour, and so we
Okay.
didn't want to tie it to the speed
All right.
limit.
Sorry to confuse the issue there.
Yeah. So any comments related to billboards?
No, I
In
think.
general or about this
Yeah.
ordinance?
Yeah, in general, I'd be I'd be curious for a little bit of policy discussion, just to help me draft a memo and recommendations.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is the personal thing, and I don't have like data to back it up, but I mean, I think very large billboards at the speeds on that road are distracting for drivers. I think they're difficult to read, because most people are going 50 by that 3 Mile intersection. And I think they're aesthetically, they're an eyesore. Now, I don't think you can regulate on eyesore, but maybe you can. So I guess in general, my personal feeling is that they're a huge distraction and a detraction from that area.
I kind of agree. Also, I mean, just knowing the placement of them, the one is right by a corner in the road, and it's such a heavily traveled, so it's like if you have something that large off to the side, you've got more distracted due to the volume of people driving through there.
And that intersection is gonna have increased traffic crossing 31 when that new hotel goes up, when the park entrance changes, and that's my feeling.
Okay.
There is a question that I had with respect to, again, the ordinance that I have, so forgive me if I'm out of phase, but further back, somewhere in here, we had a statement about maintenance, and it says that you must maintain the billboards, and you cannot allow trees or growth or high grasses or anything to be covering the billboard. My question is that with respect to the billboard, quote, owner, operator? What if there is next to the billboard another person's property who currently has trees and things of that nature?
I think that's been fought in court, if I remember correctly, from a long time ago. But maybe Joe knows more about that.
I mean,
No, it's a good question. Really, the only thing that the billboard operator would have control over is the property that they own or lease, depending on how they're doing it. So if there's something going on a neighboring property, other than talking to the neighbor about, perhaps something obscuring, there's not a whole lot they can do. There is some case law on it. I'm not intimately familiar with it or anything, but let's ask Brian about, probably Claire.
I was just curious because I believe that we're putting in a 20-foot height ordinance in the billboards. Where I'm going with this is that if a billboard was higher and they change their billboard and bring it down, but by bringing it down, it now is interfered with trees on the neighbor's property, is there something in there that would have to possibly force that person to do something to their trees?
well, a few comments. One, related to the grass and the maintenance, that's for all signs, so we would really go to the property owner from an enforcement standpoint for grass around the sign, whether it's a billboard or a regular sign. Related to the trees, a billboard is special land use permit, so as a part of the site plan review, we'd be taking a look at trees, vegetation, site distance, all of those in front of the planning commission. So no billboard would be approved without carefully going through all of those considerations.
Yeah, I'm with you, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's a gray area because this is now not the property where the billboard is nor the owner is, but it's a property within a certain visual distance
Yeah,
that
it's-
could obscure the billboard.
Yeah, I think it's the same parcel, and it's just a lease as opposed to ownership, but I think it would be reviewed the same way we reviewed TC Water Sports, which, they're an applicant, but also a lease.
Well, I'm not trying to
leasing.
get into specifics, I'm just trying
Yeah.
to, something popped into my
Yeah.
head when I was reading that. But I think that it is a discussion that we need to have.
Okay, well, we will definitely get that as an agenda item on the upcoming meeting, probably late summer, early fall. might not be in time for the new ordinance update, but amendments happen frequently, and so it may end up being our first amendment. So with that, Joe, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, while we're still on signs, the nameplate thing that was brought up during public comment, that's actually a carry forward from the existing ordinance, so if you are inclined to change the policy, you could discuss that tonight, but it is a carry forward from the existing ordinance. I just wanted to make that clear, so that if you're thinking about it, just, if you want to make a change, we can certainly make a change. The other half of tonight's discussion is going to be Article 6. That establishes development review procedures, site plan review, special land use review, land use permits, notices of public hearing, traffic impact reports, and planning and development are the subsections there. And then this is just what we've already looked at, Articles 1, 2, 3, 4, and 7. I can come back onto the screen for the discussion. And I can also put the draft ordinance up there anytime we want to reference it visually as well.
Well, how do you want to do this? Do you want to proceed through 5.1 and go through numerically, or do you want to just open it up to general discussion?
I think it makes sense to try to go through in section order, and if there are no comments on that particular section, then we just move forward. 5.1 would be the starting place. That is accessory buildings.
Okay, I do have a question on 5.1. Under major accessory buildings, we have a definition in 2.2 on minor accessory. Am I, again, behind the time? Have we a definition of major accessory buildings? I didn't see one. There is some reference to it, but there's nothing specific as saying minor and major in 2.2.
It's not minor, it's major.
No, we haven't.
So everything else.
Yeah.
I understand, so, okay, so therefore, we'll just say that within 2.2, where it basically says this is what a minor and then everything else. Okay, that being the case, on number 3, major accessory buildings shall not exceed 35 feet. My question is 35 feet of what? Height?
Height,
Width?
yes, that's supposed to be height.
Length? So we're missing a word in there.
All right,
Number, so
noted.
it's under K,
It's under K3. It just says major accessory buildings shall
not exceed
exceed.
35 feet in height. Okay, yep.
Just another thing on that major accessory building, we do link back to a definition, and there is no definition.
Right, that's
Yeah.
what,
Whether we want to define it or not, we have a hyperlink there, so.
Yeah.
Yep.
We have just, it links to the accessory building
Yeah.
as opposed to major. So, okay. One thing I wanted to bring up on accessory buildings is just, I think we've made some really good modifications, because as you'll see, in 2 weeks from now, we've got 2 public hearings for pole barns, or garages on parcels where they're a little bit larger. They hit that threshold for requiring a special land use permit and public hearing with the planning commission. So we've relaxed the standards so that the size of the building is proportional to the size of the parcel, as opposed to
Right.
tying it to the size of the principal dwelling. And I think that that's helpful from just a fairness standpoint. If you have a small home, you shouldn't be penalized for, the size of garage that you can build. And in addition, I think that the impact of a larger building it's more relative to the size of your parcel than it is to the size of your home. So I just wanted to make that point. So we still do have special land use permit trigger, but it's just, I think, a little bit more straightforward than in the current ordinance.
Okay, that's 5.1. Anything else? 5.2? Okay. 5.3, off-street loading.
Yeah, this one's pretty straightforward. One thing I did want to notice is item 5.3C, which gives the planning commission some latitude to modify the loading requirements. I know it just in my experience working all over the state, a lot of times the loading requirement is very strict in a zoning ordinance and there's no waiver provision. And you wind up with a small office or something that's never going to have something bigger than a box truck or even a van delivering things. And we've got this 50 by, 10 loading space. So you're able to do some rational wavering there. If you feel it's appropriate for the site.
Makes sense.
Okay? All right, 5.4, signs.
I would say just in terms of content, we've made a lot of changes to be consistent with Reed versus Gilbert. So, previously we regulate real estate signs, we regulate, political sign, all these different categories that would not hold up in court. And so this is a very clean version of the sign ordinance. So I think that that's a benefit. Another change that we've made is that we've reduced the size of the signs along US 31 and in the regional business district. But at the same time, we've increased the sign size for like some of the churches and other uses that are in our residential district. So I think that from my perspective, the signs will be more appropriately sized kind of throughout the township.
My question on lawn signs, especially during political times, would that be under Section E, temporary signs, item 2B? In recognition that there's a need for additional experience of speech prior to a scheduled election, et cetera, so it applies for a period of 60 days prior to until 3 days after the government-designated election day. Is that also lawn signs?
Yeah, and that was one item that I talked to Joe about earlier today. Based on legal guidance, we are going to not have not regulate signs around elections differently than any other time of the year. So we're gonna update it just because there was concern from a legal perspective, the rationale of saying that why is there need for additional expression during election season and not during, Christmas time or other times throughout the year. So the recommendation from legal counsel was to basically have those provisions for number of days per year, consecutive number of days consistent throughout the entire year. Not have a special provision during election season.
Okay, so this is going to change.
Yeah.
Anything else on 5.4?
No?
Okay, 5.5, zoning lots.
That was actually an amendment that we made a couple years ago with the Planning Commission and just a clarification of how adjacent parcels are treated from like an assessing standpoint. So that was taken from our most recent amendment to the ordinance. It's really just a clarification.
Could you, on that one, in the first sentence, I understand what they're trying to say. Then it says, if the lots, when combined, still do not meet the area or dimensional requirements established by the zoning ordinance or any amendment thereto, then the combined lots or portions therefore may be used as one non-conforming lot. Could you help me with that a bit?
So,
Right, you're combining lots that even combined don't quite get to the minimum that's required. They're still allowed to be used as a non-conforming lot. It's in line with the non-conformity regulations that we have elsewhere in the ordinance that, you have to meet other standards to use the lot. You have to meet the setbacks and things, but you can still use the non-conforming lot, even if you didn't get it quite to the right size to meet the ordinance.
Would we still require the setbacks?
yes.
Yes, yeah, all the setbacks and other dimensional standards of the ordinance would still apply to that lot.
Should we say something that you still have to meet setback requirements, et cetera? I mean, it doesn't.
I think it's taken as a given legally.
Honestly, I don't know if this provision is even necessary, but the reason we put it in and we worked with Peter on this provision was because previously the assessing department was, like in, for example, Pine Grove neighborhood, they were allowing divisions of, like say a parcel that was previously combined, they would allow it to be divided again, kind of back to the original plat, even though it didn't meet the underlying dimensional requirements. So it didn't meet zoning, but it was still being permitted to have a split, just because it was, the split was kind of going back to the underlying plat. So this is really just a clarification that any split, land division, anything like that has to meet the underlying zoning requirements. And if a property owner owns two parcels that are next to each other that both don't meet the dimensional requirements of a lot, then they would be treated as one parcel.
I'm with you, but I'm just
Yeah.
I'm just saying, should we not have some phrase in there that responds back to the fact that you still have to meet the setbacks? Check with Peter.
Okay. I mean, Peter wrote this, but we can check with him.
Well, I personally always get kind of whatever when it's like you understood, and people do not always understand.
Okay. Okay, we'll check on that one.
5,
Probably
6?
check with Brian, just because he's working with us on the ordinance, but.
5, 6?
Yeah, it's, yep.
I have a question about 5.6. With the clear vision zones at a street, I get this is for site standards, but if they are, in some cases when they're allowed to grow up or something like that and you can't see, is that regulated at all by the township, or is that, I mean, is there any enforcement, or is the road commission? I'm just curious, because I see places where, just some weed shrub type thing has grown up and you can't see, you got to inch out in the intersection. And I was wondering how is that enforced? Or how,
Or you can't see the stop sign,
all those things. And
Yeah, that's
which means someone's going to blow it.
That's a good question. I mean, generally, that's road commission right of way, and in some
Right.
instances, MDOT. So I think it's probably just getting in touch with road commission and letting them know that,
Right.
that there's a concern, and we can certainly help facilitate that if it's brought to our attention.
But from a site development standpoint, we don't allow anything to be planted there when we look at the site standard.
If it's on the property.
It's on the property,
Yeah.
right, okay.
Yeah, I mean, if it was in the right of way and we were doing the site plan review, then we could flag it at that time, but,
Okay. I was just curious.
yeah, good question.
That's all I have.
Okay. 5.7, landscaping and buffeting.
So this part, you'll see, we added a lot of provisions to this, and I should have included that spreadsheet that I created. I forgot to add it to this packet, but you might recall that there was a spreadsheet that I created that showed kind of the existing requirements and standards and what's being proposed. And really, from a landscaping perspective, right now, we're not prescriptive in terms of the species requirement, the spacing requirement, the diameter requirements or the height requirements of evergreens. So this is much more prescriptive and will result in much more high-quality landscaping plans. We have a lot of developers that come in and provide high-quality landscaping plans, but we also have some developments that come in that are not providing, that are not kind of meeting the industry standard in terms of landscaping and high quality. So this is very prescriptive, it's consistent with what other communities have, and so I'm happy with that. The other thing that, with our tree preservation subcommittee that we worked with a few years ago, one of the concerns was just on our buffering between uses, and we didn't previously have any requirements for buffering, so if you have like a high-density residential right next to a low-density residential, we had just the standard setback, but we didn't have requirements for like berms, and so I think that this is gonna provide a lot, like kind of a better level of a surety that when, higher intensity uses go in, they do have the more intense buffers and berms and those types of screening. So I think it's overall. I remember Matt Cook was a big proponent of just the buffering and those types of things. So we did add all of that into, whether it's a major buffer or minor, depending on the type of land use that's adjacent to it.
I think it's a good job. All right. We're on 5.8, access control measures. Bless you.
Thank you.
This is very similar to what we have in our current ordinance under access control.
Yeah, generally trying to avoid multitude of driveways feeding into a small space on a road. It's really primarily a safety provision.
Is this the part where did we change some stacking stuff when we, in the subcommittee, there was some concern about like culverts spilling out in the road that somebody had brought up. And did we change how they're required to stack on the property? I could be thinking of a different discussion.
I remember something to that effect.
There is some, in here, there's some stacking.
Are you talking about vehicular stacking?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
think
built-
Yeah, that's in section 5.2. Yes, that was addressed.
Street parking.
Right.
okay, that was okay, that's where it was,
But
okay.
I think we, maybe with drive-throughs or,
Right.
yeah.
Right, exactly. Yeah, yep. No, you're correct. We did address that. Yep.
5.9, private roads.
So this is one where we did make some changes to this. We've also these are the standards, but then we've got some actual, like, more technical requirements. And right now, with the technical requirements, we defer to Grand Traverse County private road standards, which are also based on the previous public road standards. So all that to say, we're working with Wade Trim to update the technical specifications that this will refer to when we're reviewing a development. We've also reduced like the right-of-way requirement. So right now, the right-of-way requirement is 66 feet. We've reduced it down to 50 feet. So what we're finding is that private roads don't need to be built to public road the road commission isn't taking on new roads. And so in a lot of instances, we're finding that we're requiring them to be overbuilt, wider, more right-of-way than is necessary. And so we're looking to, still make sure that it's accessible by emergency vehicles and has the safety requirements, can accommodate utilities and those right-of-way easements, but that we're not overbuilding the size. And that just allows, the setback for homes to be closer and just allows the less space required for new residential developments.
All right. Oh, a great one here, 510, dumpster enclosures.
Did this change much?
No, it's pretty close to what we have right now.
Yeah, if you got good dumpster standards, there's really no reason to to do too much with it.
That's one thing we were doing well, was
That's
it?
right.
All right,
They were
Description of the whole thing.
great.
we
great
had
debate,
dumpsters
but
down.
Good solutions.
I'm sure it has nothing to do with the fact that it's a small or little section.
511, screening of mechanical equipment. Nothing there.
This is new, but it makes sense.
Right. Yeah.
Seeing none, 512, pedestrian-oriented commercial design.
So with this one, and Joe, feel free to jump in here, but we took the standards that are currently in the Airport Service District and also some from East Bay Corners and applied them to like all of the commercial districts. And as we put this together, you might recall that the Warfels submitted comments with some concerns about requirements for, having like all windows on the first floor. They've got hotels. And so we did work with Giffords Webster to allow some waivers and some more flexibility with these pedestrian-oriented commercial design standards. So we're keeping the standards as is, but acknowledging the fact that with a gas station, with a hotel, with certain types of developments, requires some flexibility with these standards, but still wanting to, be consistent with the type of requirements that we have to facilitate pedestrian connectivity in front of the building as well as internal throughout the site circulation.
I like the fact that all utilities shall be placed on the ground.
Yep. That's the dream of every community, is to have them all underground.
Get those wires down. Okay. 513, exterior lighting.
This similarly is, we keep the dark sky compliance requirements that we have in our current ordinance, but some of the new requirements that we have are more specific, related to like the color temperature. We reference like the Kelvin scale and those requirements. So right now, our lighting, that I would say these new provisions are more restrictive and more protective of dark sky. Right now, we allow 1 foot candle at the property line, and I think we've reduced it down to, Joe, do you remember?
0.3.
0.3 foot
Yeah.
candles. So we are, better containing the light on the property. And
Yeah. The color temperature things become a lot more important as LEDs have taken over. Their standard LED can be quite harsh light, and if you lower the color temperature, the light gets more yellow, and you don't get that harshness on sites that are lit by those fixtures.
I have a question on this one. When we talk about the types of lightings that are prohibited, we have lighting that is oriented upward, except as provided in this ordinance. What about lighting of flag poles, the American flag at night.
Right, we did talk about this at the steering committee. I actually looked into, I don't have it on hand at the moment, but I did look into the rules around this, and there are, there's not actually a requirement to light flags at night. That was one of the things that we discussed at the steering committee. There's kind of like an etiquette around it, but the flag code has actual requirements for the display of the flag. And one thing that Claire and I did verify is that there's not actually a requirement to do that. Claire, I'm blanking a little bit on exactly how we wound up addressing that in the
Yeah, I mean,
ordinance.
I think the way it's drafted right now, you wouldn't light up a flag.
Wouldn't,
Yeah.
yeah. I didn't.
Unless you could light it down, you
Yeah.
can, you could do that.
That seems kind of hard to do.
Light it down?
Yeah.
Yeah, because you can't mount it above 20 feet, so.
So
mean,
basically,
we could-
people
we-
can't light
yeah.
up their flag.
Yeah, I mean, we could have an exemption to allow them to uplit their flag.
Well,
But
just-
right now,
just-
the way it's drafted is that you wouldn't light up the flag at night.
right.
Well, maybe, yeah, I guess. Well,
For some reason, there was a requirement that you had to, but.
I thought that, yeah, I thought so too, if you left it out.
I've had a few hotels that wanted to put in flags and uplight them, and so the guidance I'd previously given them was that our ordinance didn't allow for it. So, something we could change, but we,
But with the
And those-
hotel.
Kind of on
they
the
got-
fence about that.
With the hotel, they got site lighting for parking, so it's gonna be somewhat lit up, but
Right.
I have a hard time telling somebody that they can't light up their
Right.
American flag.
Oh, actually, we did, if you go to E waivers and exceptions on page 5-65, we did address it here. Recognized by the township, there are certain uses or circumstances not otherwise addressed in this section, such as lighting for monuments or flags, that may have special exterior lighting requirements. You can waive or modify specific provisions, determining that there are some conditions that have been satisfied. So like the minimum light necessary is one of those conditions, but we did actually put something in here that addresses that. So I just had to go through it and refresh my memory.
Okay,
Okay, I think that's legit.
yep, gets it.
what number was that, Joe?
That's 513E, so the very last subsection of that section.
It's in that whole first
Oh, yeah,
paragraph.
yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I thought we had done something and it wasn't coming to me.
Okay, how about 514 and 515 for that matter? Sanitary standards and stormwater detention.
Not too much to say about
Yeah.
14.
Yeah, it's pretty much referring you to another source, basically, because it's
Yeah.
not regulated under zoning.
All right, on to Article 6.
I'll just mention the sidewalks and pathways. We've got a 6-foot wide sidewalk and a 10-foot wide non-motorized pathway that's required to be put in front of new developments. And we're a finalist or kind of waiting on final determination for our non-motorized plan that we have a grant application in for. But we have kind of loose recommendations on where sidewalks and where pathways are throughout the township based on our non-motorized map, but we're going to have a lot more, better direction as we move forward with this planning effort, so.
So just to clarify, so where are we talking, a 6-foot wide sidewalk plus in addition to a 10?
No, one or the other.
One or
and
the
you
other.
refer to the non-motorized map that we
Okay.
currently have in the zone, in the master plan.
Okay.
But it just, I think, I'm excited to have it more refined and
Mm-hmm.
more detailed.
Okay.
6.1,
One thing you'll notice in 6.1 is 6.1C, the requirements for the application contents is done as a table. And the reason we did that is to allow us to pull that right out of the ordinance and put it in a development guide, and then it becomes a checklist as well in that left column. So when someone's submitting a site plan, they've got the checklist right there, and they can just tell us, okay, I've included all this stuff, or if it's not applicable or whatever. That's just kind of a practical note, I guess.
Yeah, I also will mention that you'll recall in the environmental assessment in the Forest Lakes overlay, there was some portions that we took out of that environmental assessment, and you'll see that these have been added into site plan review. So instead of having them specific to like the Forest Lakes overlay or environmentally sensitive areas, they're across the board as applicable.
Right, yeah, the thinking there at the steering committee was it's all part of the watershed, so.
Yeah. So there's some specific to environmentally sensitive areas, but then there's some that are broadly kind of for the entire, for any zoning district.
Okay. 6.2, special land uses. Let's see much. Okay. 6.3, condominium subdivisions. Okay. 6.4, land use permits. Nope. 6.5, notice of public hearing. No. 6.6, traffic impact reports.
This did change a little bit, right, with the
Yeah,
requirements?
yeah. So I would say the main changes, what we were finding was that the previous requirements for our traffic impact statements were quite onerous, especially with a use that was permitted by right. And we were having a little bit of challenge, if it's permitted by right, what are we getting out of the traffic impact statement? And so this is kind of designed, it's got a little bit lower trigger in terms of what triggers a traffic impact report, but it's intended to really provide the information that we're looking for with site plan review, which is like, are additional turning lanes needed, like, the actual road improvement limit right out, those types of things. So really trying to make sure that we're getting the information that will help inform the site plan and not extraneous information.
Could I ask you
Right.
how, when we determine this, in setting the trigger, when we have, it says proposed development will generate 150 or more directional trips during the peak hour, or at least 1,000 trips per day. How do we,
Find out.
yeah,
I get in touch with Royd Trim and they check with their transportation engineer. And so it's a whole table formula based on the use, whether it's a hotel, whether it's single family, whether it's multifamily. I asked if there was like some resource that I could have so I could figure that out. And it sounds like it's complicated and expensive. And so it's easier for them to just check their. It's easier for them to just check.
They want to send you that bill is what they
Yeah.
want.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's much too complicated. Okay, but the point there is that we have some mechanism to.
Yeah, and so that's what I do with all of, like, with site plan review. Like, for example, recently, we required a traffic study for Hilton, and so that was based on the fact that that was triggered by the number of trip ends.
6.7, plan unit development.
We did make some changes to this, and Paul, you might recall that we had quite a bit of discussion about it. One of the big points of discussion was whether or not a public hearing would be required by the township board. It's currently required by the township board, and the zoning ordinance subcommittee ultimately recommended to keep that the same.
Yeah.
And so right now, we have public hearing with planning commission and then public hearing with township board for final approval.
I like this. And that was it.
That's those two sections, yep.
Okay. Any other comments generally on the articles? Okay.
Well, thank you, Joe.
Hey, yes, thank you all. I very much appreciate your attention to the matter and the discussion. It's been really good. If anything comes up and you feel like you need to ask a question or something, go ahead and send it to Claire and she'll share it with us. We talk pretty regularly. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe. It's been a long process
Thank you.
and a good one. Thank you.
Hey, Joe, while I've got you on the
Sure.
line, I just, looking ahead to next month, so we've got our special joint session that's scheduled with Township Board and Planning Commission for July 16th. And Joe, do you have any thoughts just about kind of the structure of that? And look, I will definitely plan to send out the draft ordinance to both Planning Commission and Township Board so that you have time to review it and any changes that have been made. And anyone who's interested in a printed hard copy and updated, happy to make that for you so you can review the most up-to-date version. But Joe, do you have any just guidance on kind of the format that you anticipate for that joint session?
I think the rounder the table, the better. It's good to have a discussion format for that kind of thing. I'll give some more thought to the details of how we're going to go through everything, but I think what we'll try to do is we'll try to kind of go article by article through the ordinance and tee up each section with a little primer. And then Claire, you and Andy and I can go through and kind of figure out what issues we want to highlight. That are perhaps major policy changes and things like that. We can talk about the rationale behind the way it's been done in the draft, and then whether or not any adjustments need to be made based on the discussion that occurs. But that's my general thought about it, but we can get into a little bit more detail in the next couple of weeks as the date approaches.
Okay. And yeah, it's really, from my perspective, it's an opportunity for the township board to review it and have questions or concerns answered by planning commission and addressed by planning commission, because I want to make sure when the planning commission holds a public hearing for this, that the township board is comfortable and has reviewed it, because after the planning commission holds a public hearing, recommends it to the township board for final approval, I don't want it going to the township board before they've had ample opportunity to provide input, feedback, review, ask questions. So
Yeah.
I would say if the planning commission has, questions or specific issues, get those to me ahead of time if possible, because I think ideally with this joint session, we want to be hearing from township board with some of their questions or concerns, and hopefully with the planning commission, we've vetted most of your concerns about what's in there, but.
I think it would be important, kind of given the density of the document, to tee up the most substantial changes for that discussion.
Yeah.
Ones that have impacts on people's daily lives that they could,
Yep.
because wading through it is, you kind of get lost a little bit.
I agree. I think that's great. I'm going to bring back those three, policy spreadsheets that I had at the beginning, and we'll go through those. And I do think that there's definitely some changes, some substantial changes that have been made that we'll make sure that we highlight at the beginning. That's good feedback. Thank you.
All right. I have a question on the agenda that we, well, not the agenda, but we had a letter here from Brio Beach Inn. Are you,
Yeah, it's in here.
Oh, yeah, yep, and that was something that, thank you for reminding me about that. I talked with Jonathan Pack, he's interested in putting in a new sign at Brio Beach. I followed up with Joe and with Giffords Webster about some of his concerns. Really, the way that our ordinance is drafted right now is that as long as a sign is not impeding on right-of-ways, you know, in the setbacks, overhanging onto sidewalk, public area, anything like that, it would be permitted. And so the way that our ordinance is drafted right now, he would be able to put in a new sign,
would?
yes.
Oh, so his letter he was misinformed, or not, or
No,
just?
you know, we did address based
Oh,
on his
his
concerns,
Okay.
because we had one place in the ordinance that just said it needed to meet right-of-way and those types of things, and then another place in the draft ordinance where there was a setback.
Okay.
Right now, in our current ordinance, we have a 10-foot setback, and it makes it almost impossible for many of the businesses to put in a sign, just with how tight some of those buildings are.
Okay, so I didn't understand what.
But thank you for that, because I will follow up with Jonathan Pack, because he's out east with his family, and I'll let him know that
Okay, so this is now resolved.
it is, yep. As drafted, unless the, planning commission or board feels that there should be more of a setback. But from my perspective, as long as it's meeting, not encroaching on right-of-way, utilities, anything like that.
Yeah, it didn't look like there was
Yeah.
any problem.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. All right, then, thank you, and we'll start the second public hearing at 7:39.
Good evening again, Judy Nemitz, East Bay Township. Just a little history on the billboard. When that was discussed and electronic billboards first came into the area, we discussed the length of the electronic message as well. So that might be something you want to, because if it's too quick, that's really going to be a traffic issue. So that's a little bit of history. And then lastly, this is a great change. I just really want us to all think about enforcement. Enforcement's going to be the key to the new ordinance, and how the proactiveness of that enforcement and not the reactiveness is going to be key here. And so I know that the planning department is looking at additional staff in some respects, but I think we have to be cognizant about things that are rather a little bit of minutia versus really, really major things regarding enforcement. So thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you. Seeing nobody else, we'll close it at 7:41. The next regular meeting is July 2nd at 6:30 PM. And then, as we talked about, there will be a joint work session between the Planning Commission and the Board of Trustees on July 16th at 6:30 PM also. And with that, we are adjourned.